Time now for Focus. Donald Trump might well have said, no, it's not right for Americans, but thousands of communities are nevertheless determined to meet the requirements laid down in the Paris climate deal. Authorities in 12 US states, as well as towns, businesses and universities nationwide, are all clambering to show their support, even though the president has pulled the US out of that hard-fought COP21 accord. Our correspondent Philip Crowther has been to take a closer look at what's being done in one corner of Pennsylvania.
We're taking the elevator up to the top of the crater, which is approximately 275 feet above ground level.
Smoke used to billow from this cement plant in Pennsylvania. Environmental regulations have put a stop to that. But still, 5% of the world's CO2 emissions come from cement production.
The Lehigh Valley is an area completely surrounded by mountains. The Redding Prong on the south side and the Blue Mountains on the north, which is the beginning of the Poconos.
This green valley was once steel, coal and cement country and the source of the pollution that comes with it.
There is PPL power plant. That was a coal-fired power plant, and due to emissions, they changed to oil and gas.
When Donald Trump decided to withdraw from the Paris climate deal, he mentioned the jobs he could save in all of the industries that once dominated this valley. Climate change is not the US president's priority, but states, companies, universities and cities want to fulfill the US pledge to curb carbon emissions. There are many in Pennsylvania's Lehigh Valley, where a city like Easton is trying to reinvent itself now that coal, steel and cement no longer provide the jobs.
There's a lot of things at the local level. Unfortunately, when the president of the United States comes out against it and says it's a hoax, it becomes a lot harder for us to sell it to our constituents because he is the president of the United States. But I think that's the only issue. I think cities, we can do it without the federal government. It's going to take longer. It's going to take a lot more effort. So we've come up and we've made an agreement, a contract with U-Haul, car share. And people, they laughed because some of the older people couldn't understand not owning their own car. And what happens is, there's two of them, and and they're usually never here. So it's fortunate there's one here today to show it, but they're used a lot. As a mayor, when you talk about climate change, vehicles anything we can reduce on vehicles is the best.
New LED streetlights, a car share program, these are some of the small things cities are doing to be able to say they are upholding their part of the Paris bargain. Universities around the country have signed the pledge too. It's called We Are Still In and was created by former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Lafayette College is one of hundreds of universities that signed the promise.
I think it's very important that all entities, no matter how small or large, treat this issue very seriously. I think if people were to say that we're just too small to make a difference, then certainly we wouldn't be able to achieve those goals. It will be one of the most energy efficient academic science buildings in the country. So that is exactly the kind of thing that all of us in this country, colleges and universities, can do to make an impact on the environment. If you take a look over here, this is the future site of the building.
But one environmentally friendly science center won't reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 26 to 28% below 2005 levels. That was Obama's promise, undone by a president who wants to create jobs here. The coal industry, in danger under Obama, is a favorite of President Trump. He wants to reward his voters with more jobs and fewer environmental regulations. Rusty Taylor runs one of the few coal mines in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania.
We've got to have faith in our elected officials to make the right decisions on our behalf. And I think abiding by the Paris climate deal wasn't in the best interest of Americans. I think withdrawing from it is. In the long run, it'll create more jobs in this industry. When you have a president that is willing to promote and tout the benefits of coal, it makes you feel a lot better. I mean, I'm all about diversity in electric generation, and if you live in an area like this where you get cold beneath your feet, it's probably a good idea to figure out how you're going to use it rather than going to something that, something like solar or wind.
Those alternative energies, barely mentioned by the president who loves coal, are now seen by some as part of the resistance to Trump.
Oh, okay.
Floyd just had his first solar panels installed by Solar City, the company run by billionaire Elon Musk.
More people need to step up, and I think what America is doing now, the part that isn't the president's base, they're making a statement so that in the future, that no matter what they say, we're going to do what we need to do to save our Earth, because this is our home.
Yeah.
We got to keep it.
Yeah. No planet B, right?
Yeah, right.
Next door, a whole elementary school gets its energy from a solar panel array in the schoolyard. That's a rarity in the United States, but something to give hope to those who fear Trump's policies could create a deadly climate change trap for the next generations.
Well, for more on this story, we can speak now to Rémi Pillet, the Senior Director at America's Market Intelligence, who joins us now live from the US. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you. First of all, we saw in our focus report there just one example of these local level schemes aimed at curbing climate change. Just how strong or powerful are they in your view?
Well, it is powerful when you have more than 200 cities that decide to join forces together to try to mitigate climate change. It's not something that should be looked down on. I mean, we're talking about more than 50 million inhabitants, and those 200 cities include the 10 largest cities in the US. No company is going to turn away its back from the possibilities of addressing a market and addressing a sizable share of the population. So they're going to have to be able to abide by a certain amount of regulation that are issued at the state level and at the local level. One example is the fact that here in the US, the car industry started developing green technologies because California issued some very stringent rules on emissions, and they didn't want to turn it back to the California market. So we still have a large development in terms of focus on climate change energies, and also continuing on the momentum inside the US to favor some more efficient technologies.
But without the formal or the official backing of the White House, just how far can this grassroots movement go? Isn't there a danger that such initiatives will simply remain at a very local level?
Well, we are missing the fiscal element in terms of finding some fiscal incentive for the purchase of energy efficient car, for example. But still, there's a large size of power from the local level here in the U.S. in issuing regulations, in creating the infrastructure at the local level in terms of transportations, in terms of efficient buildings, and this has a strong impact on the development of those technologies. Now, if we're looking at the U.S. staying out of the Paris Accord for more than 4 years and 8 years, then this move from the Trump administration will become structural. But so far, we're still looking at companies understanding that there's no way out of finding and developing energy efficient technologies, and therefore we still continue seeing a focus on producing the right type of equipment and on investing in the right type of infrastructure, which is essential in the long run in terms of mitigating climate change.
Moving on, after previously calling climate change a hoax, Donald Trump has chosen to prioritise employment over environmental policy. In your view, is the president correct in his belief that pulling the US out of this Paris climate deal will save or protect jobs?
Well, it's trying to answer to his basis, and his basis from the red states, the coal industry, and also his donors to his campaign. But definitely the kind of job that he's protecting are very just short-term jobs. The long-term jobs are definitely in terms of environmentally efficient technologies, in being able to address also international markets. I mean, other countries around in the US, Latin America is making a strong focus and strong development in terms of green technology and green infrastructure. So if you want to be able to address those markets, you have to be able to develop the right kind of technology and services that will be energy efficient, that will be green curving. Therefore, you will be able to face the competition from other countries, whether China, whether Europe. So in the long run, in terms of developing the right type of jobs for the US, you need to turn towards energy efficient, environmentally friendly technologies. The ones that are being protected right now are just very short-term perspective and clearly focus on red states rather than the larger interests of the United States.
Mr. Piet, of course, these grassroots movements aren't just a US trend. A total of over 7,000 mayors worldwide are going against Donald Trump's stance here on the Paris climate deal. Chancellor Merkel has, of course, made climate change top of the agenda at the G20 summit in Hamburg. The pressure is really building here on the White House and on Donald Trump to do more.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's what President Macron is trying to do by inviting Donald Trump to the Baptiste Day, the 14 Juillet celebration in Paris. But unfortunately, Donald Trump tends to be very stubborn on those issues. He has a militant base in key states that will actually elect a representative in 2018 that are still seeing his moves as following up his campaign promises. It will take some time to be able to re-educate the population, to try to make them understand that it is in their best interest to move away from fossil fuel, to move away from the coal industry, and to try to invest in the right type of technology and the right type of service to be able to address and win key markets internationally in Latin America, in Europe, in Asia, and be able to service them. Now, we know that Donald Trump is not going to be the right person to do this, but there's this grassroots movement, this movement on the internet, the movement from different cities, from different governors, trying to explain the key interest of focusing and investing on green technologies is an interesting counterpower that will be, in the long run, able to curb the investment here in the US.
Rémi Piet in Miami, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for being with us.